They say trust is the foundation of any marriage, but what happens when that foundation crumbles in an instant? For me, it all began on a quiet evening while I sat on the couch, sipping coffee and scrolling through emails. My wife was away on a vacation, one I had lovingly paid for, thinking she deserved a break from her stressful work routine. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional chirp of crickets outside. Everything seemed peaceful, but peace can sometimes be the calm before the storm. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an open line. My wife's call had accidentally connected to me. Curious, I placed the phone to my ear, expecting her to realize the mistake and hang up. But instead, what I heard froze me to my core. A deep, unfamiliar male voice spoke, laced with smugness. "Your husband is such a naive loser, paying for our vacation while you enjoy my company. How does he not suspect a thing?" Laughter followed. Her laughter. The same laugh I once adored now sounded like a dagger twisting in my chest. "He's completely clueless," she replied casually. "He doesn't even cross my mind when I'm with you." For a moment, the world around me ceased to exist. The coffee in my hands went cold, and the emails on my screen blurred. My wife, my partner, my supposed best friend, was mocking me with her boss while I sat here, believing I was making her happy. As the conversation continued, every word felt like a betrayal slicing deeper into my heart. They weren't just talking about their affair, they were reveling in it, humiliating me in the process. I sat there in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to my ear. Every word replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and for a moment, I questioned if this was really happening. Was the woman I devoted my life to, the one I trusted completely, capable of such cruelty? The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt suffocating. I put the phone down, her laughter still echoing in my head, and looked around at the photos of us together on the wall. Our wedding day, vacations, anniversaries. They now felt like mocking reminders of a life that had been a lie. Then, anger began to replace the shock. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the way they ridiculed me, the way she called me a naive loser. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was I really that blind? I couldn't sit still anymore. I got up, pacing the room as plans started forming in my mind. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. No, they needed to face the consequences of their actions, and I would make sure of it. But first, I needed to make it clear to her that the life she was mocking was over. Without hesitation, I walked to our bedroom and grabbed a suitcase. Every piece of clothing, every belonging of hers, I packed with a calmness that surprised even me. Her life in this house was over, just like my trust in her. Next, I texted her. "Don't bother coming back home. Your things are waiting for you at your lover's house." I attached the address and hit send. As I watched the message deliver, a wave of determination swept over me. This wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about reclaiming my dignity. After sending the text, I didn't wait for a reply. I knew her well enough to predict the reaction: shock, panic, and maybe even an attempt to manipulate her way out of this. But I was done falling for her lies. I loaded her packed suitcase into my car and drove to the address I had for her boss. The thought of confronting the man who had mocked me so casually made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. Revenge, I reminded myself, is best served cold. When I arrived at his upscale apartment complex, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This man, who thought he could humiliate me, would now have to deal with the fallout of his actions. I left the suitcase right at his doorstep, along with a note that simply read, "Since you're so good at taking care of her, she's all yours now. Don't forget to remind her what a naive loser I am." As I turned to leave, I spotted a security camera above the door. Good. I wanted there to be proof of this moment. A silent message that I wasn't the fool they thought I was. Back in the car, I took a deep breath and made another decision. This wasn't enough. She needed to feel the full weight of what she had done. I needed to protect myself and ensure she couldn't come crawling back into my life. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer and explained everything. I wanted a divorce, and I wanted it done swiftly. No negotiations, no second chances. My lawyer, understanding my urgency, advised me to file a restraining order as well, to prevent her from causing any further disruptions in my life. By midday, the paperwork was in motion. It felt empowering to take control of the situation. While she was off playing house with her boss, I was dismantling the life we had built together, brick by brick, lie by lie. To ensure there was no chance of reconciliation, I also reached out to her family and friends. I told them the truth, word for word, and made it clear that I was moving on without her. If they chose to support her, so be it. But I wasn't going to let her paint herself as the victim in this story. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. The silence of the house felt heavier than ever. I'd cleared out her belongings, but the memories lingered like ghosts. Everywhere I turned, there was a reminder of what once was, a life I thought was real, now shattered into pieces. The bed we once shared felt too large, too empty. The dining table that once held our laughter over dinner now stared back at me with a haunting stillness. Even the little things, her favorite coffee mug, the blanket she always curled up with, seemed to mock me. They were small, insignificant objects, yet they carried the weight of betrayal. One night, I found myself staring at an old photo album. It was from our honeymoon, her smiling face pressed against mine, her eyes full of promises I now knew she never intended to keep. I flipped through the pages, each one cutting deeper than the last, until I slammed it shut and pushed it aside. I wanted to hate her completely, to erase every ounce of love I ever felt. But the pain was too fresh. Love doesn't vanish overnight, even when it's betrayed. And that's what made it hurt so much more. Just when I thought I had endured the worst, her number flashed on my phone screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe even a lingering shred of hope, made me pick up. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable. "I got your message," she started, her tone a mixture of fear and desperation. "Please, let's talk. You don't understand. This wasn't what it seemed." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. "Wasn't what it seemed," I snapped. "I heard every word, remember? You laughed at me, called me a loser. And now, you want to explain? Save it. You made your bed. Go lie in it with him." She sobbed on the other end, pleading for another chance. But her tears didn't move me. They felt like a performance, just another lie in her web of deceit. "I don't owe you anything anymore," I said coldly before ending the call. As I put the phone down, a strange emptiness settled over me. Cutting her off didn't feel like a victory. It felt like burying a part of myself. Weeks turned into months, and the wound began to scab over, though the scar would always remain. I threw myself into work, into hobbies, into anything that could distract me from the ache in my chest. But there were nights when it all came rushing back. Her laughter with him, her betrayal, the life I had lost. Those nights were the hardest, filled with questions that had no answers. Why did she do it? Was I not enough? Could I have done something differently? In the end, I realized the only way to truly move on was to let go. Not just of her, but of the anger, the regret, and the longing for answers that would never come. The nights became the hardest part. The house, once filled with her voice and the mundane sounds of daily life, now echoed with nothing but silence. It was as if the walls themselves had absorbed the betrayal, whispering it back to me in the quiet moments. Sleep was elusive. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the phone call in my mind. Her laughter, his smug voice, it haunted me, like a wound I couldn't stop picking at. Even in sleep, the betrayal followed me. I'd dream of her, of the life we had before, only to wake up and face the crushing reality all over again. Some days, I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. I'd sit by the window, watching life go on outside, wondering how the world could be so indifferent to the storm raging inside me. My friends tried to reach out, but their words felt hollow. "You'll find someone better," they'd say, or "time heals all wounds." But what did they know about having your entire life uprooted in an instant? One evening, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. My eyes were sunken, my face unshaven, my shoulders slumped under the weight of heartbreak. I hated what I saw, not because of how I looked, but because of what I had become, a shell of the man I once was. She had taken so much from me. My trust, my confidence, my sense of self-worth. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for what felt like hours, confronting every emotion I had buried. Anger, shame, self-pity, they all came rushing to the surface. I punched the wall in frustration, tears streaming down my face as I let out a guttural scream. For the first time, I let myself truly feel the pain, instead of trying to drown it out with distractions. The betrayal brought with it a cascade of doubts. I started questioning everything, every moment we shared, every decision I had made in our relationship. Was she always this way? Did I miss the signs? Was I so blinded by love that I failed to see who she really was? Worst of all, I questioned myself. Was I not good enough? Did I drive her into the arms of another man? These thoughts gnawed at me, creating a vicious cycle of self-blame and anger. I began to resent the kindness I had shown her, the sacrifices I had made to give her a comfortable life. She didn't just betray me. She mocked me for it, made me the punchline of her twisted joke. Amidst the darkness, there were small, fleeting moments of clarity. One night, as I sat on the porch staring at the stars, I realized something. Her betrayal wasn't a reflection of me. It was a reflection of her. I had given her everything I had to give. My love, my trust, my support. If she chose to throw that away, it wasn't because I wasn't enough. It was because she didn't value what she had. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it planted a seed of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could start to rebuild. The anger that had been bubbling inside me for months finally found its outlet. No more second-guessing, no more wondering about the what-ifs. She had crossed a line, and it was time for her to face the consequences. I contacted a divorce lawyer and laid out everything, every betrayal, every lie, and the disgusting conversation I overheard. I wanted full custody of the house, and I made it clear that I would not allow her to have any part in my future. The lawyer agreed, and we started the process of finalizing the divorce, while I made sure to keep everything airtight. The restraining order I had filed earlier remained in place. She couldn't contact me, couldn't come near my property, couldn't even try to manipulate her way back into my life. I wanted to make sure she never had a chance to disrupt my peace again. The divorce hearing wasn't dramatic. She looked nothing like the woman I had married. There was no remorse in her eyes, only a sense of entitlement. She tried to play the victim, but the evidence was clear. When the judge signed the papers, a weight lifted from my shoulders. Once the divorce was finalized, I thought that would be the end of it. But as anyone who's been through something like this knows, it wasn't that simple. The emotional scars don't fade just because the legal ties are severed. I started seeing a therapist. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to talk about the pain, the betrayal, and the overwhelming emotions that I had been holding on to. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to understand that it wasn't my fault. I began taking small steps toward healing, going to the gym, focusing on my career, reconnecting with old friends. It wasn't easy, but with time, I could feel myself becoming stronger. I found solace in the things I had once neglected, my passions, my hobbies, the things that made me who I was before she ever entered my life. Months passed, and while I hadn't completely healed, I had come a long way. One day, I found myself sitting at a cafe, enjoying a cup of coffee, when I met someone new. She wasn't a replacement. She wasn't a rebound. She was just someone who saw me for who I was. And in that moment, I realized I had finally started to see myself again. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something important. Hope. Hope that I could still trust, still find happiness, and most importantly, still believe that I deserved love. The pain of the past would always be there, but it no longer controlled me. The man I had been, the one who had been devastated by betrayal, lost in darkness, was now someone who had learned, grown, and come out stronger. Years later, I look back on that chapter of my life with a different perspective. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, they are all part of who I am today. But they don't define me. I've rebuilt my life, brick by brick, and I've learned that sometimes letting go is the only way to truly move forward. I'm not the same person I was when she walked out of my life. I'm better, stronger, and wiser. And most importantly, I've learned that my worth was never tied to her or anyone else. I deserve to be loved, respected, and valued, and that's exactly what I've found. First and foremost, from myself. This chapter of my life closed with no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance of the past and an optimistic look toward the future. The scars remain, but they no longer hurt. They've become the proof of my resilience, and for that, I am grateful.
Thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed my channel yet, please do so and press the notification bell. This way, you'll stay updated with more shocking real-life stories.